When a troubled young man was awarded with a large inheritance, he decided to travel the world. However, his travels led him down a path that nobody would expect, a path that ended with live streaming an attack on an enormous scale for all to see. This is a story that often goes untold on YouTube, and that's for a couple of different reasons. One reason would have to be the sheer brutality of it. Another reason would be the political and racial elements of it. And a third reason would be that nobody wants to be accused of supporting this guy. So let's just approach this story from a pure documentary standpoint, no opinions really involved. And with that said, let's start at the beginning. Brenton Harrison Tarrant was born on October 27th of 1990. An Australian man, he grew up in Grafton, New South Wales. There he spent the majority of his life, attending school and living with his family. However, this family would come to fracture very quickly, with Brenton's parents, Rodney and Sharon, breaking up and separating while he was still very young. Brenton and his sister went on to move in with their mom at first. Sharon has since said that Brenton changed quite a bit after the separation, becoming much more anxious and clingy, failing to socialize well with his peers. Things were made much worse when Sharon started dating. Her new boyfriend was a man of Aboriginal ancestry who quickly grew violent with not only Sharon but the kids as well. After this continued for a while, Sharon finally took out an apprehended violence order against the man in order to protect the kids. The whole incident likely sparked a bit of hatred within Brenton that would only grow on to fester over time. After all of this happened, Brenton and his sister went on to move in with their father, where it seems things were much more stable for the most part. However, even with this stability, there were still problems outside the home. When Brenton was around 12 years old, he started gaining weight rapidly, which led to a lot of bullying at school. Given the fact that he already had very few friends and struggled to socialize, this more or less killed his drive for school. At some point, he lost his home in a house fire as well, with his grandfather passing away not too long after. It's said that all of this left him fairly traumatized at the most, or with quite a severe case of social anxiety disorder at the least. At school, Brenton's teachers remarked that he was a bit of a strange kid. While he seemed completely disinterested in school and barely completed his coursework, he still seemed very well-read and quite smart for his age. They said that he was unusually well-versed in historical events like World War II, even for an adult. While Brenton had always been into video games to a degree, it was around this time in middle school that he really started getting into MMOs, massively multiplayer online games, and first-person shooters. His parents were never really too strict with his game time or his internet access, so he spent quite a bit of his free time at home gaming with other people online. Even when it came to school, he spent almost all the time he could on library computers. Brenton started showing some signs of racism around this time as well, going on rants about immigration when he was only 12 or 13 years old. Once he turned 14, he started using 4chan pretty regularly. It was during this period of his life that he first revealed to his sister that he thought he was autistic, maybe even sociopathic, but that was only a personal hunch. He continued to rant about Aboriginals in particular, often referencing his mother's ex-boyfriend to justify his hatred towards them. He started bringing it up so much that one of the teachers at his school took him aside and talked to him on at least 2 occasions about his behavior. Eventually, Brenton moved on to graduate middle school and start attending the Grafton High School. Shortly after his life at this new school began, he was hit with some bad news. His father had been diagnosed with mesothelioma. He had previously worked closely with asbestos, and that had come back to bite him. Eventually, his father became part of a pretty large-scale settlement for victims of the disease, landing him well over $500,000 in damages. Brenton, wanting to forget about what was happening with his father and hopefully end his bullying, started hitting the gym. He quickly lost 52 kilograms, about 114 pounds, and gained quite a bit of muscle. After attending the Big River Squash Fitness Center in Grafton for quite some time, he even got a job there as a personal trainer. It seemed that he might have found his calling, but given what was happening with his father, it was inevitable that things wouldn't remain positive for too much longer. At some point, Brenton's father discussed with him that he would be ending his own life. It's apparent that he had decided to go out on his own terms. He made Brenton agree that he would be the one to find his body. One day in 2010, that plan came to fruition. After his father's death, Brenton inherited the remainder of his money, about $457,000, most of which came from the previous settlement. Brenton, unsure of what to do with himself, dove back into his love of video games to help cope with his father's death. He developed a small group of friends online that he would talk and game with pretty often, growing particularly close with one friend from New Zealand. Brenton, along with the other members of this group, would often speak about their ideologies together, bouncing off one another and only sending Brenton snowballing further down the rabbit hole. Brenton suffered an injury while working out in 2012 and decided it was time to stop working at the gym. Instead, he decided he would use the big chunk of money that he inherited to both invest and travel. He set out on a number of international solo trips, heading everywhere from Europe to Asia. Brenton even found himself traveling with a large tour group in North Korea, where he said that he had a pretty good time. In March of 2013, Brenton found himself traveling out to New Zealand for another trip, this time to stay with his gaming friend for a while. In contrast to his other trips abroad, this time he went with one of the few friends he managed to make in high school. He ended up staying in the country for a couple of months by the end. Brenton, his friend from high school, and his friend from gaming all stayed in Waikato with the gaming friend's parents. It was the first time that they had actually met in person, with those parents saying that Brenton was both polite and kind. That gaming friend and his parents were big into guns. They took Brenton out to a shooting club and allowed him to fire some of their guns. It was the first time that he really had such an experience, and it seemed to have awakened something within him. At the end of the trip, he decided that he would stay in New Zealand for a bit longer even after his friend had gone home. He traveled the country for a little while longer on his own. During that time, he visited Dunedin, a city that he would come to fancy. Then he headed back towards Australia at the end of May. Even after coming back to Australia, he really didn't want to be home. He drove a van around the country for the next 9 months. Not content to stay in Australia, he made his way out to Europe as well, visiting several different countries. One country that he seemed to like visiting was Turkey. However, it was during this trip that he would come to have his first run-ins with real white nationalist groups. He ended up supporting some of them financially, donating a few $1,000s to a few prominent groups in a few different countries, such as Generation Identity. He even talked to the leader of the group, Martin Sellner, and offered to meet him in Vienna. By 2016, Brenton was praising the leaders of many similar extremist groups in Australia as well, regularly commenting on a few of their web pages that have since been deleted. He was also much more active on 4chan at this point, getting more violent and threatening with his content over time. Many 4chan posts have surfaced that are said to be his, but it's hard to know for sure. What is known for certain is that a man in Melbourne filed a police report against Brenton after he wrote, "I hope one day you meet the rope," to him online. The police didn't find that comment worthy of action, given that it wasn't a direct threat, and told the man to just block him. Brenton started to frequent 8chan as well, often seen as a much more extreme version of 4chan, one that has birthed numerous mass killers in the past. Many of these killers posted their own manifestos and other content directly to 8chan, leading to the website becoming very controversial. Brenton was also active on YouTube, where most of the content he watched only reinforced his own beliefs. He created his own little personal echo chamber for himself, absorbing the content day in and day out. He later called YouTube a significant source of information and inspiration. Brenton went to many countries on the eastern side of Europe from 2016 onwards, wanting to see the sites of famous battles between Christian forces and the Ottoman Empire, ending up in Croatia, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Turkey, and Bosnia. He grew very fond of the Balkans, posting a lot of Balkan nationalist material to social media in support. On social media, he also began to call for the United States to be weakened, saying that their support of Muslims over Christians in Serbia made them traitors. As his views grew darker, so did his demeanor. Even Brenton's own mom noticed a change in his personality around this time, saying that she was concerned for his mental health. On his personal Facebook page, he showed many different photos from his travels along with various different memes and propaganda interspersed between. He shared multiple memes featuring Dylan Roof, a white supremacist killer from the United States who attacked a historically black church in his area and killed numerous people. In one image, Obama is giving him a medal. In another, he's edited to have sunglasses and a smile. Eventually, Brenton decided that he would move out to New Zealand for a longer period of time than before. He arrived in August of 2017, first living in Anderson's Bay and then in Dunedin. One of his neighbors there described him as being a bit of a loner, but still very friendly. Brenton had developed a fascination with Islamic terror attacks over the last couple of years. It was during his studies that he began to grow interested in committing a similar attack of his own, just carried out in the opposite direction. For the time being, though, he wasn't quite sure. It didn't take too long for Brenton to get a firearms license there, acquiring it in November of 2017. He started buying weapons shortly after. He bought 4 guns and a load of ammunition online almost immediately after. The shop that he used didn't notice anything unusual about him. However, what they didn't know was that he was illegally modifying the guns after the fact, replacing their standard magazines with much more high-capacity ones after the purchase, something that wasn't allowed under his specific license. He modified some of the triggers to require less pressure as well. In total, he spent over 30,000 New Zealand dollars on guns, attachment, and ammo. He started attending the South Otago Gun Club, practicing shooting there fairly often. At one point, he even landed himself in the hospital after sustaining injuries to his eye and to his leg, saying that he got them by trying to dislodge an improperly chambered bullet in his gun. The doctors also ended up treating him for steroid abuse at the time, and if they would have reported that to the police, then they might have had to reevaluate his right to his gun license, given the risk of roid rage and all. In the end, though, the doctors decided not to report it for whatever reason. Brenton remained unemployed for the entire time he was in New Zealand, disinterested in finding a job. He was content living off of his inheritance for as long as he could. He had invested some of the money, earning him a bit each month. He also bought a rental property with his sister that earned him a bit of income. When it came to long-term plans, though, he didn't really have any idea. He debated on either moving to Ukraine or just ending it all, but he hadn't decided. What he did know was that he would likely run out of his savings by August of 2019. He started to feel that his life would basically be over at that point, so he began to brainstorm what he would do before his time ran out. His mind kept coming back to one answer: committing an attack. After a period of a few years, Brenton couldn't see his life playing out in any other way. He felt solidified in his resolve. He wanted to commit some sort of attack and accepted that it would likely leave him in prison for the rest of his life. Still, though, he felt that it would be worth it. He started to buy more gear, like a bulletproof vest and a helmet. He started to decorate his guns and magazines as well, writing all over them in white paint. He wrote names, phrases, and code words related to all sorts of historical conflicts, mainly those between Muslims and Christians. He also wrote the names of more recent victims of Islamic terror attacks along with the names of killers he admired. Along with all of the other writings was the phrase "remove kebab," which was an anti-Muslim phrase that originated in Serbia. Also included was the number 14 in reference to what is called the 14 Words, a white supremacist mantra. On his vest was a black sun patch. Attached to it were 2 dog tags, one with a Celtic cross and another with a Slavic swastika. Brenton began to survey local targets for his attack. He knew from the beginning that he wanted to attack Muslim targets, mainly mosques, but he wasn't too sure which ones he wanted to target. He settled on a few places of interest, looking them up online. He even went to their social media to try to figure out their floor plans through their photos and look at their prayer schedules to find out when they would be the most busy. Eventually, he started to drive by each of the mosques in person on January 8, 2019. It has been said that he even used a drone to further map out their grounds. Before Brenton were to carry on, he felt like he needed to do one more thing before he moved on, that being writing a manifesto. Like many other recent killers with similar ideologies, he felt that this would be a prime way to spread his message after the fact. He sat down at the computer at his Dunedin home and began to write. After a while, Brenton had written himself a very lengthy 240-page manifesto, but after a personal review, he just wasn't happy with it. It had been a few months since January, and he knew he wanted to commit an attack fairly soon, so he decided to scrap the whole thing and start over, this time trimming the fat and aiming to leave a shorter, much more concise message. Even then, this new document ended up being 74 pages long on its own. He called this new writing The Great Replacement, a reference to the conspiracy theory of the same name. In the introduction to the manifesto, Brenton talks about how birth rates need to change. He says that birth rates in the West need to reach replacement levels. He laments that no white countries are reaching this level on average. Because of this, he says mass immigration is taking place to fill the void. He says that this will destroy cultures, communities, and nations. He then describes himself, speaking of his childhood, of which he lies and says that he had no real issues. He then speaks of his disinterest in school and even his investment with BitConnect, a cryptocurrency Ponzi scheme. Failing to mention his inheritance, it seems that he wanted people to think that he had made his money that way, saying that he used that money to travel the world. He wrote, "Just an ordinary white man, 28 years old, born in Australia to a working-class, low-income family. My parents are of Scottish, Irish, and English stock. I had a regular childhood, without any great issues. I had little interest in education during my schooling, barely achieving a passing grade. I did not attend university as I had no great interest in anything offered in the universities to study. I worked for a short time before making some money investing in BitConnect, then used the money from the investment to travel. More recently, I have been working part-time as a kebab removalist. I am just a regular white man from a regular family who decided to take a stand and ensure a future for my people. He then explains why he is going to carry out an attack, and he lists his motivations very clearly. He says that he is doing it to show that white lands will never be conquered, as revenge for the foreign invaders of Europe throughout history, revenge for Europeans taken as slaves by the Muslims, revenge for those who died in terror attacks, to intimidate foreigners against immigration, to incite further violence, to create change, and to drive a wedge between Europeans and Turks, among others. Finally, he hopes to further increase the political divide in the United States. He hopes that doing so will kill the idea of the cultural melting pot and reduce the power of the US military, which he feels aids Muslims in the Middle East too much. In fact, he said that he chose to use guns in his attack in order to facilitate more debate about the Second Amendment in the US, hoping that more calls to abolish gun rights would cause even more upheaval. He says that he was first motivated to carry out an attack when he heard of the terror attack in Stockholm on the 7th of April 2017. He said that this attack somehow felt different to him. This was because of Ebba Ackerland, a young girl who was run over by a Muslim attacker. He said that witnessing towns in France, in which he said it seemed that white people were becoming the minority, only solidified his resolve. He admits that, while he wasn't a part of any sort of group, he had donated to several in the past. He says that he doesn't want fame, feeling that he will probably be forgotten fairly quickly. He says that he is choosing to target Muslims for a simple reason. They're a large group of immigrants with a strong culture and social bonds that he feels are a threat to his own culture. He said that he doesn't actually hate Muslims, but he does hate white people who convert to Islam. He said that he chose New Zealand for an attack mainly because it's a peaceful place and he wanted to show that nowhere is too safe. Brendan says that he originally planned to attack the Al-Huda Mosque in Dunedin after seeing that they listed their videos on Facebook as being, quote, only for Muslims. He thought that this represented their refusal to integrate into society perfectly. However, he soon found something that he felt symbolized his cause even more. He said that this was seeing a mosque that had been converted from a church, symbolizing the idea of the Great Replacement perfectly in his mind. Brenton was likely talking about the Linwood Islamic Center, although he wasn't quite correct. While the building did look a bit like a church, it had actually been converted from a Baha'i center. The news media very heavily portrayed Brenton as a right-wing conservative, but he claims very much the opposite in his writing. He says that he isn't conservative, saying that conservatism is only corporatism in disguise. He actually says that he could be a socialist, depending on what kind of people were in power. He actually devotes a whole section of the document to ranting about conservatives, writing, "Not a thing has been conserved other than corporate profits and the ever-increasing wealth of the 1% that exploit the people for their own benefit. Conservatism is dead, thank God. Now let us bury it and move on to something of worth." Many news outlets also claim that Brenton praised Donald Trump within his writing. While you could take it this way, Brenton didn't seem to like the man. He seemed to like the idea that Trump might unite white people, but not so much the guy personally. Feeling that people would question if he was a Trump supporter, he says, "As a symbol of renewed white identity and common purposes, sure. As a policymaker and leader, dear God, no." Predicting that the media would likely blame his love for video games on the attack, he answers the question, "Were you inspired by violent video games in advance?" sarcastically writing, "Yes, Spyro the Dragon 3 taught me ethno-nationalism. Fortnite trained me to be a killer and floss on the corpses of my enemies. No." He does admit that he developed his views by being on the internet and engaging with content that influenced him. He says that he has read the manifestos of other killers, naming Dylan Roof, but denies that Dylan influenced him too much. He incorporates many calls to action throughout his writing, and given their nature, they can't really be discussed on YouTube. What can be said is that he spends at least half the document trying to goad his readers into committing similar attacks of their own, guilt-tripping them for failing to act in a way that he feels is beneficial to the race. He says that he plans to survive his attack, something unusual for people in his position. He says that he plans to go to trial and plead not guilty, writing, "The attack was a partisan action against an occupying force, and I am a lawful, uniformed combatant." He says that he realizes he will remain in prison forever, or at least until someone kills him. He says that, in the event that the other races do take over, he will end it himself. He ends the document by writing, "Goodbye, God bless you all, and I will see you in Valhalla." The day was now the 15th of March, 2019. It was a couple of months before Brenton was all set to run out of cash. He decided that it was time to carry out the attack that he had been mulling around for a couple of years by this point. After a few weeks of planning, he felt that this would be the day. He loaded up his car and put on all of his gear. He had his armored vest with at least 7 fully loaded magazines in the pockets. He put on a helmet, which was actually an airsoft helmet with a mount for a GoPro camera. He threw several of his guns into the passenger seat of his car and a few more into the trunk. He also had several gas cans in order to use as a part of incendiary devices. Before setting out, Brenton decided that it was time to send out his manifesto. He sent it via email to at least 30 different people, including straight to the Prime Minister's office and to several different news media outlets. It was quickly forwarded to security in a few of these places, but it took them quite a long time to notify the police about what they had found. After emailing it to those parties, Brenton decided to post the whole thing to both Twitter and 8chan as well. On 8chan, he made a whole thread dedicated to his attack. This was because of what he planned to do next, start a full-on live stream of the entire massacre. Brenton started up his GoPro camera and began to film a live stream. He then posted a link to the stream on 8chan, one which led to his personal Facebook page. Posting to 8chan's poll board, he wrote, "Well lads, it's time to stop shitposting and time to make a real-life effort post. I will carry out and attack against the invaders, and will even live stream the attack via Facebook." More than 100 people tuned into the live stream, none of them making a complaint to Facebook or telling the police about what was happening. While others had attempted to live stream their attacks in the past, Brenton was the only one so far to successfully pull it off. The live stream started in his car, with Brenton looking down at the guns and the other gear in the passenger seat. Only a few seconds into the stream, he opened by urging his audience to subscribe to PewDiePie, which was a big meme at the time. This was in reference to PewDiePie's rivalry with an Indian YouTube channel, T-Series. It's likely that Brenton felt this meme acted as a good bit of symbolism for what he was about to do. He left the parking lot and set off on his journey towards a mosque in Christchurch. He began to play music from a Bluetooth speaker attached to his outfit. The first song to play was Serbia Strong, a Serb nationalist and anti-Muslim song. At one point during his drive, he pulled his car over to the side of the road. The audio cut out for a minute. During that time, Brenton took off his helmet and turned the camera around to show his face. Shortly after, he fixed the audio and prepared his gun by flipping on a strobe light attachment on the underside of the barrel. Then, another song, the British Grenadiers, a traditional British military marching song, started to play. Soon after the song began, he calmly parked his car in the driveway of his first target, the Al-Noor Mosque. At 1:39 p.m., he parked his car in the driveway next to Al-Noor. He stood up with his gun in hand and went around to the trunk of his car. He then armed himself with a Mossberg 930 shotgun and a WW-15 rifle before walking towards the mosque. A man on the sidewalk actually turned to look at him, surprisingly showing little to no reaction to his weaponry and tactical gear. At 1:40 p.m., Brenton made his way towards the front door of the small mosque. A man at the doorway turned to cheerfully greet him with an upbeat, "Hello, brother." However, immediately, less than 1 second after the greeting, Brenton pulled up his shotgun and fired 9 times toward the entrance, killing 4 innocent people in the process. It was now that people inside the mosque began to scream as Brenton made his way inside. He threw his shotgun to the ground just inside the entrance and pulled out his WW-15 instead. Then he began to fire towards the people in the hallway, killing 2 men in the process. As one man tried to crawl away, he shot him several more times in the back. With the chaos and the strobe light disorienting his victims, they were left far too stunned to fight back. Brenton moved straight through the hallway to the main prayer hall. On the way, he shot towards a few people who attempted to flee. He then entered into the prayer hall. This was where 2 crowds of people, one on the left and one on the right, were hiding in the corners out of view from the doorway. Helpless to defend themselves, there wasn't anything else they could do. Brenton began to fire at them indiscriminately as they lied on the ground. 1 minute into the attack at around 1:42 p.m., the police received their first phone calls of gunfire being heard in the area. It was nearly this exact time that the Parliament office that Brenton sent a copy of his manifesto to were reporting it to the police. Even so, the police couldn't possibly arrive fast enough to stop the attack. One man, a worshipper named Naeem Rashid, decided that he would do everything that he could do to end the attack. Completely unarmed with little options, he decided to do the only thing that he could. He charged towards Brenton, knocking him backwards in the process. This caused a magazine to fall out of his vest and onto the ground. Unfortunately, Brenton had laid on the trigger during the struggle, shooting Naeem in the process. Brenton then got up and shot him several more times at point-blank range. Brenton looked like he was about to leave the mosque before he heard the sounds of some moaning coming from across the prayer hall. He then turned around and returned to the room, firing into the small crowds of people many more times as they remained helpless, alternating between the left and right sides of the room. He picked up the magazine that Naeem had caused him to drop, loaded it into his gun, and headed back to the hall one more time. He then continued to empty his magazine into the crowds of people once again from the middle of the hall as they continued to scream. He then loaded another magazine and continued to empty the gun into the crowds of people. Then he spotted a man get up and run towards the entrance. He moved towards the hallway and began to shoot at the man as he fled. After the man fell, he continued to shoot at other people within the prayer hall. With the screams growing quiet, he decided to leave. Out of breath, he ran back towards the sidewalk. There, he looked to his right and saw another man running. He opened fire on him as well. Seeing someone behind a car on the left, he also started to shoot towards them. Brenton returned to his car and threw his WW-15 onto the ground. There he picked up a Ruger AR-556 and went back towards the mosque's front entrance. However, this time he walked past the gate and towards the parking lot instead. There he began to shoot at people hiding behind their cars, killing 2 and injuring 1 other. Not content to leave the carnage here, he entered into the mosque one more time. He started to shoot at the people in the prayer hall once more. However, this time would be different. Not content to only shoot from the middle of the room, he wanted to get more up close and personal. He wanted to make sure that he had finished the job. He started to attack the victims at nearly point-blank range, aiming for the head. Hearing one man groaning, he went out of his way to shoot him in the head before moving on to others on the other side of the room. He once again left the mosque, this time running faster than before. Then again, he went outside. He saw a woman on the sidewalk to his left from the entrance. He then shot towards her, sending her falling to the ground. He walked closer to her, and as she cried for help, he shot her in the back a few more times. He then returned to his car. Brenton got back into his car, started it, and drove right over the woman's body and back out onto the road. The whole attack lasted roughly 6 minutes, but to all of those involved it felt like hours. Speeding off down the street, he remarked that the attack did not go as planned before chuckling. He stopped the car, picked up another pump-action shotgun from the passenger seat, and started shooting at people as they fled while driving, breaking his windshield and the passenger side window of his car in the process. Out of breath, he started speeding towards his next destination, the Linwood Islamic Center. He drove erratically, honking at people crossing the street and weaving through traffic. It was clear that he didn't want to stop for long at all. He muttered to his audience, disappointed that the attack didn't go exactly as he had planned, but some of his voice was drowned out by the audio on the speaker. He said, "I left 1 full magazine back there, I know for sure, possibly more. I had to run along in the middle of the firefight and pick up the mag that fell out pretty much fucking instantly. There wasn't even time to aim good at so many targets. And there's so many people. The car park was full, so there's no real chance." Brenton then heard ambulances rushing towards the scene of Al-Nur. He abruptly stopped talking and slammed on the accelerator. He muttered, "Oh shit," as police cars entered into the street as well. While he was speeding down the road, the livestream abruptly ended for unknown reasons. The police started to arrive at the Al-Nur Mosque just moments after Brenton had sped off. Given that no description had been given for the car he was driving, they had no idea who to look for. Brenton continued driving east on Bailey Avenue at nearly 130 kilometers per hour, or 81 miles per hour. While driving, he aimed his shotgun at another driver in a car next to him and attempted to fire it twice, but luckily the gun failed to fire both times. Undeterred, Brenton continued on the path to his next target, the Linwood Islamic Center. Brenton arrived at Linwood at 1:52 p.m. At the time, about 100 people were inside the very small building. He parked his car in the entrance to the driveway, preventing any other cars from leaving. Given that the front door to the mosque was actually behind the building from the view of the street, it seemed that Brenton had a hard time finding out how to get in. Instead, he began to shoot people outside and through a window. In that short burst, he killed 4 people and started a panic inside the building. Very much like at Al-Nur, one man at Linwood decided to take a stand against Brenton. Abdul Aziz Wahabzada noticed that Brenton was getting another gun out from his car. Unsure of what to do in the heat of the moment, he took a small credit card reader and threw it at him. Brenton reacted by firing back towards him. Abdul then picked up a shotgun that Brenton had dropped, only to find that it was out of ammo. Still, he tried to get Brenton's attention by hiding behind a nearby car and yelling, "I'm over here." Brenton ignored him and returned back to the mosque, this time making his way inside. There, he killed 3 more people. He once again left the building, returning to his car for a second time. There, Abdul confronted him once again. Brenton took a bayonet out from a pocket on his vest, but for whatever reason, he decided not to engage with Abdul, leaving him there instead. He got back into his car. As he started to drive away, Abdul chucked his own shotgun at him. 1 minute later, the police were entering Al-Noor Mosque and seeing the horrific scene for themselves. Just as they did that, some other officers were flagged down, being told that the attack wasn't over. Shots had just been fired at Linwood as well. This time, they were told what kind of car the killer was driving, a silver 2005 Subaru Outback. Brenton's car was very quickly spotted by a police officer less than a minute later who set off to chase him. A car chase ensued between Brenton and the police until the police were able to ram his car off the road. With Brenton's car now stuck, the police were able to make their way around to the passenger side door and pull him out of the car onto his back on the sidewalk. There, they arrested him without resistance. It was now 1:59 p.m. and the attack was finally over. The whole thing had lasted about 20 minutes, but in that time, many innocent people had lost their lives. Upon being arrested, Brenton admitted to the police that he was on his way to attack another mosque in Ashburton about 90 kilometers from Linwood. In order to shake the police up, he told them that he was actually only one of 10 shooters at the time, saying that there were other like-minded people on their way to commit similar attacks. He later admitted, though, that this was a lie. A minute after his arrest, the police arrived at Linwood to see the carnage firsthand. Many worshippers were still on site, screaming, crying, and cradling their friends and family who had lost their lives in the attack. In total, 51 people had died in the attack, either on site or shortly afterwards. 44 people had died at the Al-Noor Mosque alone, with the bulk of the carnage taking place in the prayer hall. 7 more people had died at the Linwood Islamic Center. All of the victims, aside from 4, were men. Their ages ranged anywhere from 77 years old to as young as 3. 35 more people had been injured at Al-Noor and 5 more at Linwood. 49 other people had also been injured by other means, mainly while fleeing. The police were able to recover 6 different guns, 2 assault rifles, 2 12-gauge shotguns, and 2 more regular rifles. They also defused the several explosive devices in Brenton's car. The government of New Zealand, for the first time in the country's history, raised the terrorism threat level to high. The Prime Minister at the time called the attack an act of extreme and unprecedented violence. She noted that it must have been very well planned, urging people to focus more on the victims than the killer. She said that it had been one of the darkest days in the country's entire history. The police asked all mosques in the local area to close, at least for the time being, completely unsure if there were even other attackers out there at this point. In addition, they also increased police patrol in these areas for the time being. All flights from the Christchurch airport were temporarily cancelled as well, given that the regional airport had some pretty light screening. Several different government buildings also had their security increased and cancelled all of their public tours as well. The police soon made their way out to the home in Dunedin in which Brenton had been staying. They raided the home, beginning their search and hoping to find answers as to what had happened. If there were other killers out there, they hoped that this might help them find them as well. Mosques all over the world began to hold vigils and pay tribute to the victims in the attack. The Al-Noor Mosque became a large site of support as well, with victims, their friends and family, and general members of the public showing up to pay their respects. Even various local street gangs, like the Mongrel Mob, Black Power, and the King Cobra, sent gang members out to mosques all over the country to protect them in prayer time. The Imam of Al-Noor Mosque thanked the people of New Zealand for their support. A fundraiser was started online for the victims and their families, raising over $10 million over time. The government also paid for the funerals of the victims. Much of the news media turned to PewDiePie after the attacks, given that Brenton had name-dropped him at the start of the livestream. While subscribe to PewDiePie was a huge meme at the time, PewDiePie had also been accused by the media of being racist fairly recently before the attack, leading to even more accusations being thrown his way. He actually asked for the whole meme to be discontinued, saying that he was sickened to be mentioned in such a way. He said, "To have my name associated with something so unspeakably vile has affected me in more ways than I've let show." After the attack, it was announced that gun laws within the country of New Zealand would be changing. A full-on ban of semi-automatic weapons was announced in the weeks after, with a large buyback plan being initiated and quite a lot of people participating. The government also reclassified some different rifles and shotguns so that they would now require police approval to purchase. It wasn't long at all before Brenton appeared in court for the first time on the 16th of March, only one day after the attack took place. There he was hit with his first murder charge. The judge ordered the courtroom to be closed off to the public, only allowing accredited news sources inside. For the time being, it was decided that Brenton's face would be blurred out. Brenton didn't seem bothered, smiling at reporters and making an OK sign with his hand below his waist towards them. The case was transferred to the High Court not too long after. Brenton's lawyer, likely seeing how hopeless the situation was, didn't seek bail. He was sent to the only maximum security unit at Auckland Prison. There, Brenton started to complain fairly quickly, filing a formal complaint about his prison condition fairly shortly after arriving, saying that he hadn't been allowed to access newspapers, TV, the internet, visitors, or the phone. It was found that this was all lawful, so he retracted the complaint. The Linwood Islamic Center reopened on March 23rd, as well as did Al-Noor. Not too long after, the two police officers who stopped Brenton's car and arrested him were rewarded medals for their bravery at a police association conference. Brenton's live stream of his attack on Al-Noor was quickly mirrored and shared all over different video and file-sharing websites. It was especially prominent on LiveLeak, Facebook, YouTube, and Reddit. The police, along with many different advocacy groups, urged the videos to be taken down. The government of New Zealand soon deemed the video to be objectionable, making it a criminal offense to distribute, copy, or exhibit it within the country. Only journalists, researchers, and other academics were exempt. It wasn't even only the live stream either. Copies of Brenton's manifesto were soon spreading far and wide within the country and, soon enough, all over the world as well. It was even reported that some copies of the manifesto were being sold, generating a profit. Soon enough, the manifesto was translated into more than a dozen different languages and distributed all over the world. 8chan took a particular liking to it, linking to it and creating various sorts of photo and video edits that they would display on the forums. 9 days after the attack took place, someone in Escondido, California set a mosque on fire. The police found graffiti along the driveway to the mosque that referenced Brenton's attack. This was only a sign of what was to come. On March 18th, the police raided the homes of Brenton's sister and mother as well in New South Wales. It was noted that the both of them were cooperative with the police and that the raids were only done in order to deepen their understanding of the attacker. On March 19th, a man in Australia praised the shooting online. He was arrested on 1 count of aggravated possession of a weapon without a license and 4 counts of using or possessing a prohibited weapon. He was released on bail, with one stipulation being that he was to stay off of the internet. He then later pled guilty to 4 counts of possessing the prohibited weapon. A 24-year-old man in Greater Manchester in the UK was also arrested after sending Facebook posts in support of the shooting. A man in the UAE who worked for a company called Transguard was also fired after making comments in support of the murders. A 22-year-old man in New York was arrested as well when he sent messages both praising the attacks and showing an interest in committing his own. He lied to the FBI about not possessing any weapons and, for that, he was arrested. Soon after, there was a shooting at a synagogue in April in Poway, California, in which 1 person was killed and 3 others were injured. The killer, John T. Ernest, took responsibility for the fire and praised Brenton in his own manifesto. He was also an avid user of the poll board on 8chan. He tried to livestream his attack as well, but was unsuccessful in doing so. After that, Patrick Crusius carried out a mass shooting in a Walmart in the United States. He expressed support for Brenton Tarrant's attack on 8chan multiple times, even having his own sister hunt down Brenton's manifesto so that he could read it. A few months later, a man named Philip Manhouse committed a shooting at a mosque in Norway. He also tried to livestream his attack to no avail. Online, he had referred to Brenton as a saint, a term that many recent killers have used online to show respect to one another, and referred to both Brenton and Patrick Crusius as heroes. By the time all of that had taken place, the police had increased the number of charges against Brenton. He was now looking at 50 charges of murder and 39 for attempted murder. Brenton was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation as well. It wasn't too long before he was slapped with the charge of engaging in a terrorist act too. 1 more charge of murder and 1 more of attempted murder were also added on later. In the summer of 2019, Brenton appeared before the Christchurch High Court over a video link from prison. Through his lawyer, he pled not guilty to all the charges against him, just as he stated that he intended to do in his manifesto. His psychiatric evaluation had shown that he would have no problem standing trial. So, with his plea of not guilty, that trial was all set to begin. The trial was originally set to take place during Ramadan, but once it was realized that the scheduling would appear to be in bad taste, it was set for June of 2020. Throughout his time in prison, Brenton was sent a few letters from online fans. One of those letters got a response, which the 4chan user immediately posted to the internet. The Department of Corrections was heavily criticized for letting that happen. It was then announced by the government that they would explore the idea of limiting what kind of mail can be sent by such prisoners. Around that same time, all of Brenton's assets were frozen, and it was made a crime for anyone to financially support him due to his terrorist status. However, Brenton's fanboys online were still acting out in his name. On March 4th of 2020, another man in New Zealand, a 19-year-old, was arrested after making a threat towards the Al Noor Mosque over Telegram. He was identified as Sam Brittenden, a member of a white supremacist group called Action Zealandia. Brenton would appear again in another video hearing from prison on March 26th of 2020. At this time, he reversed his previous decision and chose to plead guilty to all the charges against him. In response, the courts made the decision to fast-track the case and bring it to an end as soon as possible, even during the COVID lockdown. The judge convicted him on all counts and ordered him to await his sentencing. By July, the government announced that the victims in the shooting, both domestic and overseas, would be allowed to return to the country in order to view the sentencing. Around this time, Brenton decided to dismiss his lawyers entirely and represent himself in court. After all, his fate was growing pretty abundantly clear at this point. Sentencing was all set to begin on the 24th of August 2020 at the Christchurch High Court. The highly anticipated sentence was all set to be televised, leading to a lot of spectators from all over the world. The prosecution showed how meticulously and deliberately Brenton had planned the attack for weeks, even years. They showed that he had planned to commit even more attacks on that same day before he was stopped. Numerous victims, their families, and their friends gave victim impact statements that day. All of them were covered by the international media. All sorts of statements were given. Some only spoke of their pain, some spoke of the loss, some insulted Brenton, telling him exactly how they felt about him.
He is a loner, a big fat loser, a coward and a pathetic human being.
Your father was a garbage man and you became trash of society. He is ashamed of your identity. You deserve to be buried in a landfill.
The last words I'll hear from Sire, for now, were "Cuddle me." Oh, how I regret not doing that. The last time I saw him alive, when he left for school, that faithful man.
My father, the apple of our eyes, Abdel Fattah Qasim. Hear the name. I wonder if he was in pain, if he was frightened, and what his final thoughts were.
After all was said and done, Brenton was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for every single one of the murder charges, and life in prison for the charge of engaging in a terrorist act and each charge of attempted murder. It was a first for the country on multiple fronts. For one, it was the first terrorism conviction in the country's history. It was also the first time that life in prison without the possibility of parole had ever been given. The judge said that this was because, quote, "The attack was so wicked that even if you are detained until you die, it will not exhaust the requirements of punishment and denunciation." After the sentencing, though, New Zealand revealed that they didn't really want Brenton on their hands anymore. They figured that it would probably cost them around $5,000 every single day to keep him in prison for one reason or another, compared to about $300 for a normal inmate. Given that Australia would normally deport criminals from New Zealand, they wanted to do the same and have them pay the cost of his internment. In the end, though, no formal offer was presented in order to deport him, although Australia stated that they were open to the idea. Unfortunately, this would not be the end of Brenton Tarrant's story, nor the story of the various people who admired him. It was only a few months after his sentencing that another attack would take place in his name. In Singapore, it was found that a 16-year-old Indian resident had been planning to attack a few local mosques on the anniversary of the shootings. He had written up his own manifesto in which he had used the usual lingo common in Brenton's circle, referring to him as a saint and calling the killings justified. Unable to get a gun in the country, he had purchased a machete to use before he was ultimately caught and arrested. On March 4th of 2021, a 27-year-old man in New Zealand was charged with threatening to kill after he made online threats to both the Linwood and Al-Noor mosques on 4chan. He was granted anonymity and remained in custody for about 2.5 weeks. In June of 2021, a Canadian man named Nathan Veltman hopped into a truck and drove it into a Muslim family in Ontario. He killed 4 people and injured 1 more. After he was arrested, he said that he had found support and motivation from Brenton's attacks. Brenton himself was still causing a ruckus from behind bars. He chose to appeal both his prison conditions and his designation of being a terrorist threat. Being kept in a highly secure unit within the prison, with only 2 other inmates, it seemed that he wasn't enjoying his living conditions, especially with 18 guards monitoring him at all times. However, after only a few weeks, Brenton abandoned the appeal process and just stopped working on it. This only lasted for about half a year, though. In November of 2021, Brenton got a new lawyer and he expressed an interest to appeal both his sentence and his conviction. He said that Brenton's guilty plea had been entered under duress and that his conditions had violated the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act of 1990. A year later, he appealed his sentence and conviction at the Court of High Appeal in Wellington. Survivors of the attack called the whole appeal process re-traumatizing, saying that Brenton was only looking for attention. In 2023, there was a bit of uplifting news. For his bravery in attempting to stop the Al-Noor mosque attack, Naeem Rashid had been posthumously awarded the Nishan-e-Sujat and the New Zealand Cross, both being the highest awards for bravery in Pakistan and in New Zealand. Abdul Aziz Wahabzada was similarly rewarded for his bravery in attempting to stop the attack on Linwood. He was awarded the New Zealand Cross as well. In November of 2023, the Linwood Islamic Center was torn down. However, this was because it had received a massive sponsorship from an Emirati fund, about $20 million, to build a new, better mosque that could better accommodate the worshippers. A few of Brenton's lawyers were given permanent anonymity during the appeals, citing concerns for their safety due to their support of one of the most notorious criminals in the history of the country. One lawyer asked the judge to exclude journalists and the media from his appeals, saying that it would only cause Brenton humiliation and embarrassment. The judge did not care and shot that suggestion down. After getting nothing done for about a couple of years, Brenton once again abandoned the review of his prison conditions in February of 2024. However, only 1 month later, fate would once again prove that Brenton's influence was far from over. In Finland, on March 15th of 2024, on the anniversary of the shooting, a Finnish army officer was arrested for planning an attack that day. When asked for her motivation, she said the world needed a mass culling, saying that she wanted to end, quote, selfish individualism, human degradation, global warming, and conspicuous consumption. Then again, on August 13th of 2024, an 18-year-old in Turkey, only identified as Arda K, went on to livestream himself stabbing 5 old people in a mosque on Twitter. It was noted that he was wearing a vest and a helmet very similar to what Brenton had worn. He wore a similar black sun patch as well. He even wrote his own manifesto, in which he wrote, "Subscribe to Zaid, who is a YouTuber in Turkey," in reference to the name drop of PewDiePie in Brenton's livestream. Solomon Henderson, an American teenager who carried out an attack on his high school in January of 2025, listed Brenton by name multiple times throughout his manifesto, and even recorded audio of himself wishing Brenton a happy birthday, along with some fan art. As recently as of March 4th, 2025, crimes are still being carried out in Brenton's name. The police in Western Australia arrested a 16-year-old boy in Eton who made a threat online against a mosque in Sydney that had just recently opened. Commenting under the mosque's Instagram page, he wrote, "About to Christchurch 2.0 this joint." After the post was reported, Meta actually ignored and dismissed the complaint. They later said that this was a technical error and not a sign of their poor moderation. To this day, it's still very easy to find both Brenton Tarrant's manifesto and the livestream with a simple Google search. Both of them have spread to the extent that it would be virtually impossible to remove them from the internet at this point. Due to that, it's more than likely that other killers are going to continue to get their hands on the material for years to come. Even with Brenton in prison for the rest of his life, it appears that his name is only going to continue to pop up in the news time and time again. Once again, thank you for watching my video. If you found it interesting, please give it a like, it really helps me out within the algorithm, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Recently, I've opened up a merch store. There you can get yourself some cool Dire Trip t-shirts, coffee mugs, posters, all sorts of other stuff. If you want, go ahead and follow me on social media. If you need to get a hold of me, that's definitely the easiest way to do it. I also really appreciate when people subscribe to my Patreon. There you can get videos early, ad-free, and uncensored. Channel memberships are up too, and you can get the same benefits there as well. Once again, this has been your host Kyle. Thank you, and good night.